Face the State.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Tim McGonigal. The Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center in Great Falls celebrated its 20th anniversary on May 5th. People from the community came together to help blow out the candles. The center has been open for 20 years, and to celebrate, they waived the entrance fee all day. The celebration included informational activities, Native American dancers, and a reenactment of settlement in the West. Now, joining us today are Ron Wiseman. He's the Helena Lewis and Clark National Forest Acting Deputy Supervisor. And we also have Dave Cunningham, the Helena Lewis and Clark National Forest Partnership Coordinator, and he's also the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center's manager, and they're going to be joining us to talk more about the center. First of all, guys, thanks for taking time to talk with us today.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Nice to be here.
20 years, hard to believe it's been that long. It seems like just yesterday. Can you believe that it's gone by that quickly?
We were kind of talking about that when we were coming here, that 20 years goes fast.
Yeah. So lots happened in 20 years. How was the 20th anniversary celebration? How do you think it turned out?
Well, it just met or exceeded every hope and expectation we had. Between 1,100 and 1,200 people come, just good times, smiles the entire day. The biggest challenge is we had to run and get more ketchup for the hot dogs.
All right, well, the center opened with high expectations 20 years ago. Do you think those expectations have been met or maybe even surpassed?
Yeah, I would think they've at least been met, and probably even more than we imagined. It's been visitors from all over, lots of them. The interaction with the school kids is just amazing how it fits with what we saw as a vision and how it fits in with what we do in the Forest Service.
Can you take us back to when the planning for the Interpretive Center was going on and how that went and how Great Falls was chosen in this part of Montana?
Sure. So, this is one of those stories that really predates probably all of us. But I've heard a lot of folks share, and Ron, you may also have some experience, so jump in. We know that if you go back to the early 80s in Great Falls, those are hard economic times. And I believe there was a pretty visionary group of citizens that started looking to say, what can we do for Great Falls to attract people here, to bring here, maybe beginning to look at building that tourist economy, that visitor economy, to expand beyond the days of the smelter days. And through the 80s and into the early 90s, that happened. It grew. There were visionary committees that were formed. Congressman Marlene at that time got engaged and talked to some folks here saying, I'll we'll sponsor some legislation if you get a federal agency to work with you. Dale Gorman was the forest supervisor at that time, and he shared that vision with the folks, and that led to the birth of the idea and some significant fundraising. And in 1998, May 5th, the doors opened. All
right. So that explains kind of how the Forest Service got involved in the Forest Service role. Can you explain more a little bit how the Forest Service and the Interpretive Center work together?
Sure. Well, the Interpretive Center is a unit of the Helena Lewis and Clark National Forest, somewhat like a ranger district might be. So the Forest Service, funds the building, cares for it, owns it, and staffs it. And then, of course, we do work with partners that some of them as individuals have been around for 25, 30 years, loving and caring for that facility. Or in some cases, it's sort of the offspring of the original ideas and original folks that continue on with that really great legacy.
Yeah, and when we hear the term Interpretive Center, I think a lot of people might think, oh, it's just a building by the river. But it's much more than that. Can you explain?
Yeah. It's much more than that. Of course, the draw is the center itself, but even more importantly, the people that work there and the services that they provide for interpretation, the events that they do outside of the Interpretive Center. We have the interaction with all the school kids, the Kids in the Woods that we do, and Dave has way more examples than I have.
Yeah, well, like last week and this week, every 7th grader at the 2 middle schools in Great Falls went through a field investigations program there. There are stations like aquatic invertebrates and bird watching and water quality and some fish dissection Teachers do most of the instruction. We help with the logistics and the support, and it's made possible, in at least partially, by some support from the Lewis and Clark Foundation. And so it's really that coming together of partners and like-minded people to try to provide that as an asset to the community.
So for kids and learning about the center and about this area and about Lewis and Clark, it's not only the historical perspective, but you mentioned some of the aquatic invertebrates and stuff like that. It's what's happening now. I mean, it's current.
Sure. Well, and you know, Ron and I were sharing this earlier, talking about it, that the Lewis and Clark expedition, maybe when we started with this idea, we may have just been thinking about the history aspect of it. But really, it was an expedition of discovery, science, a lot of natural science, the geography, the culture of the native peoples, just the dynamic of this group that succeeded against a task that seems almost impossible, and they did it with great grace. All aspects of those stories. It's 200 years old, but many of those are contemporary today, and so we try to cover that spectrum.
For those who have never been to the Interpretive Center, can you kind of tell us what they'll see when they come through and take a tour?
Sure. Well, you know, when you first come on in, you go to the window and you're welcomed, and you pay your fees or you show your pass, depending, and you're on into this large lobby. And right beside that is a life-size diorama of simulating the portaging of one of the cottonwood dugout canoes. You know, to get around the Great Falls, the multiple falls, they went cross-country like 19.5 miles, dragging these huge canoes loaded down with gear, and just the days that it took to get them onto the cart, to travel back with the cart, you know, and also to unload, made that journey at least 3 times, taking 2 canoes at a time. That diorama is there. Then downstairs onto the exhibits, which is somewhat unique in that it looks at the expedition from the very beginning all the way through to the end. It's not just what happened here. And then, of course, we also have the theater, where at certain times of the year we have live programs being given, as well as movies being shown, and we have movies shown all year round.
Yeah, and how many people do you estimate on a yearly basis, and maybe even since the center opened, have come through the doors?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, Dave was just sharing that with me, and it's quite amazing when you hear the numbers. And you know, he said it's a little over 1.3 million since day one. On average, 49,000 people.
That's our last 5-year average.
Yeah, and then in last year it was even a little bit better at 52,000 visitors through the center.
I know a lot of people in the Great Falls area and through Montana who've been there multiple times, but you probably get people from all over the country, and I would imagine all over the world that come here. Maybe they discover it when they come to the Great Falls area, or maybe they seek this place out as part of their vacation or their journey. Yeah,
absolutely. And we were talking, it's like, I wish I knew the exact number, but we know it's thousands of people who are following the Lewis and Clark Trail, and probably 10 to 20,000 people make it a point to come here each year to visit for the purpose of visiting the center as a part of their vacation. How many of them stay in Great Falls, we're not sure, but we know that many do. And they enjoy the hospitality here. They support the community. They come to the center. And, you know, personal story, my sister lives in Ohio. She has a coworker who several years ago came out with her family. They were going to Whitefish for vacation, but they chose to fly in and out of Great Falls because they're also Lewis and Clark buffs. And they wanted to visit the center, where they rented a car here, and then they drove to Whitefish and through Glacier and did some of that stuff. We know that's repeated many times, just don't know exactly how many.
Yeah, we know that Lewis and Clark were very instrumental in the Great Falls area when they came through on the Corps of Discovery, but Montana as a whole was a big part of their journey. So, does this center include all of Montana in this Great Falls location, or is it just mostly the Great Falls?
No, absolutely. In fact, it starts in St. Louis.
Yeah. Okay.
And all the way through to the Pacific Ocean and then back. But certainly, you know, with Montana's length east to west, as anybody who's ever driven, you know, from North Dakota to Idaho knows, it's a big state. And they spent a lot of time following the Missouri up Montana, and then ultimately, you know, crossing into the Missoula Valley and up over Lolo Pass into Idaho.
Okay. Well, how is the financial health of the Interpretive Center?
So as with every program in the Forest Service, you know, it ebbs and flows. The good thing to know is that the commitment that we have from the Forest Service for the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center is very high. We have to look at each program every year, just like we look at recreation or how we look at fire, you know, and come up with a priority for funding. But we will always do everything we can to make sure that there is a very strong base level funding support and staff to keep the center open and providing the types of services that, you know, the Great Falls and greater area are becoming accustomed to.
So we know that the funding aspect of it is partly through the federal government, but there's also, I know, some volunteers who contribute to the center and
you know,
donations.
So the cash funding is probably 95 to 98% Forest Service, but I just smile when you mention our volunteers.
Yeah.
We have got the most magnificent bunch of volunteers there. There's over 50 active volunteers. You know, a couple weeks ago we had a quarterly potluck lunch and the annual volunteer training, and we recognized 20 who had actually hit a 250 number on their years or their hours of service. So at 250, 500, 750. One individual, Jim Mead, I think had 8,250 hours donated in his life of supporting there. The group as a whole had over 63,000 hours. Oh, that's the 20 people who got awards. I don't have the total for all the other volunteers that hadn't hit that 250.
And you probably have more volunteers over the 20 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. So out of that experience came a little challenge in my mind to try to add it all up. I would say it's safe to say that half of the hours worked there at the center annually are put in by volunteers who love and care for the center, and it really is a family. We also, in addition to the volunteers, we have the Lewis and Clark Foundation that that does what it can to try to help us, and sometimes they're able to do things that we can't do ourselves. And we just see that growing stronger and becoming more and more important in the future. The Portage Route chapter, which is a chapter of the Lewis and Clark Heritage Trail Association, I probably said that wrong. You know, again, a bunch of really scholars and people that really care about the story and know it so well and know it from different points of view. And you know, people come literally from around the world to come, and the Trail Heritage Foundation has really an amazing research library right there in their office space in the center as well. And people come to use that. If you're writing a book on Lewis and Clark, you're probably going to want to come here to do some research.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and that reminded me, when Dave was handing out the awards, recognizing all the service, I went and attended, and then weren't we recognized?
Oh yeah.
This is pretty significant. Yeah, we were recognized with an award based on that use of volunteers and partnership. And
in fact, we've had awards both from the Department of Agriculture, the Forest Service, and Take Pride in America award from the Department of Interior, and then most recently the Montana Tourism group. In the category of historic and cultural attractions, I think there were 38 entries, and the center was chosen as the #1, winner, if you will, in the state in that category just here a few weeks ago.
Yeah, well, that's congratulations on that. And as far as the volunteers go, you've got 50 now. Are you always open to more volunteers? And if so, how can someone become one?
Sure. You know, we are always open for more volunteers. I want to add this, you know, our volunteers work in a variety of capacities. Some work at the front desk and welcome people, maybe collect fees, answer questions. Some work behind the scenes answering phones. Some are docents down on the exhibit floor answering questions. People help with education so when a school group comes, and we might have 80 kids, and so we're giving them very specific programs that teachers are counting on, and then they take a tour. Well, 80 kids in one group is too much, but you break them into groups of 8 or 10 or something smaller, and the volunteers help with that. And in fact, that group a group that large, we're likely to split them into 2 and maybe stagger that. So how can people volunteer if they'd like? They can quite honestly just call the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center and ask to speak with me. Okay. And you know, maybe you could even throw the phone number on your website or something.
Yeah, we'll definitely try to do that. What would you say when you bring kids in, or I guess just anybody in general, what do you guys think is the most popular part of the center?
Well, it depends on whether or not he's there. You know what I'm going to say?
I know what you're going to say, yeah. Yeah.
So all of our volunteers have 2 feet except for one. And there's Bill and Buddy. And Bill is the boy, the man, the owner, whatever you want to call him. And we have Buddy, who's a Newfoundland dog.
Oh, okay.
Like Seaman was.
Seaman.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yep. And he's there a couple days a week. And just people flock to him. And this dog is wonderful. He's also goes to hospice. Bill takes him to hospice as kind of that service type of an animal. And he's incredibly popular. Kids, petting, kids of all ages.
Yeah.
You know, beyond that, I think probably individuals, like the kids like the boat pole, the rope.
Yeah.
So, you know, other folks might like some of the maps. We have a new small firearms display that attracts those of us that are, you know, maybe Montana hunters and enjoy looking at some of the firearms from that time.
I know. I think one of my favorite things was the boat pole the few times I've been there. And I wouldn't have been much help on the expedition, I don't think, the way. But my kids, years ago, when they went, I remember there was an exhibit where they could actually try on some of the clothing that some of the members of the expedition wore.
Oh, yeah, that's
got
right.
Their pictures taken.
You know, one other piece that's real popular, I think, is the Interpretive Center also tries to include the Native American piece of this story.
Sure.
As you go along on the right-hand side of a lot of the exhibits. And again, that was so crucial to their success. Without the help of the tribes and the indigenous people along the way, and of course Sacagawea, they very likely would have failed. And we think it's a very important part of the story. Montana's tribes were involved in this at the beginning, helping to set it up, providing some feedback, and we continue to work with members of various tribes today. I mean, this past weekend we had some Chippewa Cree dancers at the festival. Really important part of the story, and it's our honor to help tell that as well.
All right. I noticed looking on the website, it explains some trails around the center too. Can you explain those a little bit for us?
Yep. Have you ever had a chance to walk on any?
I have. Yeah, I've been on the trail. There's a couple miles of trail, isn't there?
Yeah. You know, you wouldn't think 23 acres and there's like almost 2 miles of trail. There's some trail that interprets some of the different vegetation, native vegetation there. Some make their way on down to the River's Edge Trail. At least with a stairway. And then we also have the trail over to Sulphur Springs on the other side of the river that we hold the easement for and help to take care of.
Okay.
And so yeah, you can come walk around outside and enjoy that as well and learn some things with all the native plants that are there. Yeah.
How big of an area does it cover? I mean, the center itself, I guess, the physical part of it, but then the trails and the surrounding area, how much are we talking?
Well, I think the building's about 25,000 square feet, and I believe the footprint of the land is about 23 acres or so. Yeah. Okay. And then, of course, it's surrounded, abuts Giant Springs State Park, and so it feels bigger, and it acts bigger in terms of the wildlife that move through or the things that you might see while you're there.
Okay. And you've always seemed to have great events planned. I know you had the 20th anniversary, obviously, but can you tell us about some of the upcoming events for the summer of 2018?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, we're looking at, I think, a pretty standard, very busy summer. We're open from 9 to 6, 7 days a week. So it's one of those places, if you get out of state company and you have a place, come see us. You need a place to go. There, on the hour, there will be programs given by one of our interpreters in the theater. On the half hour, we show movies. We have 3 different movies that we rotate through. At Gibson Park, and I believe it's like the 15th, that weekend in June, Friday and Saturday, the Lewis and Clark Foundation has the Lewis and Clark Festival, and center staff participate in that. And there's a variety of activities. There'll be some native dancers again, and other talks and activities tied to the expedition. That's down at Gibson Park, which maybe makes it a little more accessible to some folks who literally are able to walk or ride their bicycle to that. And then throughout the summer, we're looking right now to have kind of those living history or hands-on activities and displayed. We call it river camp. A lot of times it's down close to the river. It may also be up on the flat next to the center as well. And then there'll be special events and opportunities that come along, and you know, people can just kind of keep their ears open, and we'll hope to see some of them show up for those as well.
We were talking a little bit about funding for the center. Has it been affected by government shutdowns in the past?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. You know, when the government shuts down, we are the government, so we shut, we shut down too.
Yep.
Yep.
Fortunately, I mean, this last one was very short,
Yeah.
and we were back as quickly. And beyond that, as Ron said, as funding has ebbs or flows, it affects all of our units, and with the Interpretive Center being one of them.
Okay. I was also reading that if some people can actually rent the center for special events. What are some of the things that they do there?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a pretty neat venue. And so folks may rent the outside amphitheater for a wedding or for something. There's a smaller room inside. We call it the resource room. Rent that has a small kitchen attached to it. People rent the actual lobby facility, maybe for weddings or family reunions. Sometimes a few people will rent all three of those facilities and have the wedding outside and the resource room for the folks to change in, and the lobby facility for a catered meal that may follow after for the reception.
All right.
And the cool thing about that, honestly, is those funds really do stay, and they're able to help the center continue to operate.
I also know it's very popular with I'm not sure what the name is, but there's an astronomy club, I believe, that uses the center for. It must be a good spot to view some of the celestial happenings.
Yeah, have you ever made it to one of the big star parties?
I haven't.
Okay.
No.
I wasn't. I know most of the time you're in Stanford, and it's a long way to drive.
Yeah.
We have that typically in the fall, October, November. We call it the Star Party Extravaganza, and the Central Montana Astronomy Club is really the entity that brings the telescopes and creates the outside attraction. And once a year, we have a large event inside, and we pick an astronomic theme or two. There might be a speaker, an activity for kids. One year they built replicas of satellites, and I think that was maybe because there was a recent mission to send a satellite to one of the planets, and they had the telescopes in the parking lot to look at the night sky, and families could come on in, and there were these slides, like fishing line, from the top down to the bottom, right by where the canoe is. And kids, and little paper clips, and kids would hang them, and they'd zip them down to the bottom, and there were people there that were running them over to the bottom of the steps, and the kids would run down the steps and grab their satellite and run back up and launch it again, and cookies and drinks provided by the foundation, and just a lot of happy parents, because at the end of this couple hours there were a lot of tired kids.
Sure.
Who got to go home, and of course the programming was educational but also free. And that wouldn't happen without the support of the Central Montana Astronomy Club.
Yeah, and I know that you guys have to charge for people to get in to help keep the center going. But I know there are certain days that you will have free. For instance, the 20th anniversary, and then I think you're part of that whole Great Falls
the museum consortium
free day or whatever. So.
Yeah, yep. There's a fair amount of free programming throughout the year. Most of our evening programs are free. We get speakers. The Porta-Jot chapter lately has been sponsoring a speaker like once a month. The foundation sometimes sponsors speakers or other programs. We had a man doing a play in the role of York, who was the African American on the expedition. Had actually was Clark's slave. And yet was free and a member of that expedition to a large degree during the expedition. But before and after, it was the role of a slave. So that program was free. And so we have those in the evening. We have certain days, like the anniversary, like the Museum Consortium, as you said.
Okay. Over the last 20 years, are there any memories that stick out in your mind about great, memorable moments, I guess, at the Interpretive Center?
We were talking about that on the way here, and of course the anniversaries. So 10 year, 20, hopefully there'll be 25, 30 and more of those to come. And then we've hosted the Capitol Christmas tree a couple times through here. So those were good. And, and then just the memories that folks make just coming and enjoying everything there is at the center. And, hopefully they're making great memories kind of all the time that they're there.
Yeah, right. We're kind of joking that in many ways the best memories haven't been made yet. Right. As new people come.
Sure. And 2004 was the bicentennial of the actual Lewis and Clark expedition, the Cora Discovery. So I know that was a big time for the center too.
Right.
And it was early on in the center's existence.
Yeah, those were some of the really very, very busy days, a lot of activities, a lot of special programming along the entire Lewis and Clark Trail, historic trail across the country during that period of time from 2003 to 2006 that they made that journey.
I would imagine there was a lot of like historians and people who were maybe writing books or writing papers on Lewis and Clark and the expedition that came through and wanted to see what the center has to offer.
Right, absolutely.
As you look towards the next 20 years, do you see any big changes at the Interpretive Center?
Well, hopefully one of the the biggest change will be just the ability to keep up with the ever-changing technology. You know, the use of stuff that we probably haven't even thought of.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we've recognized that the story's not going to change.
Right.
But how we interpret that, how we bring it to our visitors, there are new tools. And so we'll look to do that. But not technology for technology's sake, but rather just good tools to be able to interpret that story. There may be some changing interesting questions in American society that would be relevant to this expedition as well, that we may interpret.
Okay. And are you guys on social media, the center itself? Can people find you on Facebook? Or?
Well, the Forest has a website, and you can click through links for that. Sure. The Lewis and Clark Foundation has a website and also a Facebook page. And then the Forest has, the broader Helena Lewis and Clark has a Facebook page, and it covers all the Forest topics, including postings relevant to the center from time to time.
Okay. Why do you think it's important for people to visit and support the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center? Not just the folks from Great Falls, but anybody who comes, to the area for.
Sure. Well, probably both of us can add to this. I would say, it's really an American story. If you go back to 1803, I mean, the Revolutionary War was just a quarter of a century previous to that. And the Louisiana Purchase and the beginning of the formation of the European colonization of America. So that's a huge part of explaining how we ended up. Also the history of the tribes, and quite honestly, what happened following that, bad or good. It really has a lot to do with how we ended up where we are today, I think. And there's also some very compelling stories about individuals and people that were part of that expedition.
Well, and it provides, like we talked about earlier, that what kind of an expedition was it? These guys were scientists. They were a social experiment almost. Going out where you've never been, learning, collecting. Much like the story that we're looking at for going to Mars. That's the sort of thing that it is. So I think it's important that you can envision what had happened, how it happened, and take that and apply it to future endeavors of that sort.
All right. So 20 years in the books and probably, hopefully, many more to come.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were joking today about what the 50th will be like.
All right. Well, our guests today have been Ron Wiseman. He's the Helena Lewis and Clark National Forest Acting Deputy Supervisor, and Dave Cunningham, who is the Forest Service Partnership Coordinator and also the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center Manager. They've been talking about the role of the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center, which just celebrated 20 years. So if you're ever in the Great Falls area, check it out. It's a great place. We hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching Face the State.